this word that we think we understand, right? Exchange, this thing that we're engaged in all the time. We're always being invited into some kind of relationship around every exchange. Knowing that, it's then this question of like, how am I choosing to give my attention or to enter into an attentional relationship with something?
Welcome to episode 2 of the This Could Be Something Interesting podcast. Ben, I'll let you take it away with what we're talking about today. Interesting topic.
Exchange. Not just currency, life exchange. We're talking about life, actually. I think that's going to be the best way to describe it, really. It's not just... I think when we think of exchange, you're limiting it to this idea of like, okay, I do this thing, you get that thing. But I think exchange is within everything. So in your relationships with people, within the relationship, to your environment, to your work, it's all these sorts of things. And I guess I could describe it as I was just saying. I work in a coffee shop, and I go to the coffee shop, and I can work a certain amount of time, and I do a certain load of jobs, and at the end of that, I can get paid for it. Or I can also go there and I can, put my attention on the coffee. And then my main goal can be, I'm going to make the best cup of coffee today. And that's the exchange. I'm going there for that. I'm going to improve at this. And that's the exchange. I can improve. Or I can even go to those kind of jobs and I can recognize that it's community. I'm going to be like, I'm going to bring joy to people today. And that's the exchange. I get to bring something to people. I get to make their day better. And that's where I can put my attention. So it's about your attention on the exchanges that you're having in life. And we got Scott on today. Say hi, Scott.
Hello everybody.
I got Scott on because I feel like Scott, you're a life coach.
I am a life coach. That's true. Yeah. I coach all sorts of different people about their lives. That's why I use the word life coach. Other people are leadership development coaches and like transition career coaches. And I think the fairest description is life coach because I'm interested in people's lives.
And I think that's why I definitely felt you'd be perfect for this today. It's because I definitely, out of a lot of customers, I feel like sometimes it's questionable whether you're even there for the coffee. I think sometimes it's definitely just sticking around for the conversation, really. I'm
often looking resentfully at the queue building up behind me, wishing they'd all get lost and let me just have my chat.
And that's exactly it. I think sometimes you stay there for a little bit longer. And then another customer will come, and then you continue to chat to them.
I have been known to badger other customers as well. Yes,
but it's great. That's putting your attention on these exchanges that you're actually having. And I think I'm kind of just fascinated in terms of maybe what your angle is and what your personal opinion is on what the exchanges of life. I guess and outside of just sort of like a. Here's something for you, here's something for me. It's you simplify it. As I want to know, what is it we need to do to be getting the best out of these exchanges? Where is the attention? Where do we need to put our attention? Where are the real fruitful exchanges in life?
It's first of all, I just want to say thank you. Thanks for having me on. Like it's such an interesting topic. As soon as I started to think about it, my brain was like swelling. I was like, oh my God, this topic is so big. And you're right. It encompasses so many different parts of our lives and ways in which we can be with each other, far beyond actually what the everyday kind of understanding of exchange is, which is this sort of transactional, kind of market exchange. I give you, generally these days it's money, you give me commodity which has a certain price, and we complain about the fairness of the exchange. Usually it's too expensive. Can't charge enough money to live, so there is this very money focused kind of way of thinking about that word. Yeah. But as you've just said, it's so much bigger than that. And I'm always curious about what's going on in any interaction, in any relationship. I think it's why I've ended up doing the work that I'm doing.
Yeah. I suppose particularly with people, with what you do.
Yeah, 100%, 100%. I was thinking about this recently, and Steve Albini, the music producer, passed away recently, and I'm not that knowledgeable about him, but I'm aware of like a lot of the people that he worked with. Like he was the producer on a lot of the Nirvana stuff and PJ Harvey, and he's like this legendary kind of punk musician, really, but also like producer of that sound. And he's kind of uncompromising in some regards with his approach to music and artistry. And it got me really thinking, because I was doom scrolling on my mobile phone, as I'm prone to do, and a video with Steve Albini came up, and he was talking about this difficult place that artists or anyone creating something find themselves in, whereby they're giving this gift of creativity like into the world, and yet that world that they give it to is also a world of commodities where we have to trade our skills and our gifts in order to survive. And that really made me think about you, actually, Ben, and the work you do as an artist and how you intersect with this topic of exchange, because throughout history, like, artists have often been like, they've had patrons, which meant they haven't had to work in some regards, or there's been other modes of exchange, other ways of art coming to life, and us kind of making sure that creativity is given as a gift into the world, without it requiring like somebody to pay for it in a direct transactional sense. So I was really curious about that way of thinking about exchange, like when we give our gifts really freely,
Yeah, that's very interesting. I guess defining it by a particular skill set, artistry, a specialization, exchanging, and that, especially, I guess exactly as that is free. I mean, I'm kind of, I guess it's also that kind of a equilibrium as well, where you're spending the right amount. Like, you don't want to, if there's a friendship or relationship, wherever it is, and you're spending all this energy and you give it all, and the other person isn't giving anything, then that relationship isn't likely to sustain itself. And the same, and this is the same. I mean, this is the same with everything. This is the same with environmental kind of resources. The world offers us an exchange of resources. We use too many, and as a result, and we're not giving back. We're not exchanging that equilibrium, so therefore it can't sustain itself in the same way that it doesn't with people. And I guess even with artistry, at what point does it just turn into a business and you're just producing it for the sake of it? And at what point is there the equilibrium where people are gaining something from that exchange? The balance is made, so you offer an artistry and it inspires other people, and then it creates them to do stuff. At what point is an artist, like this person that you were just saying, they're overusing their stuff just for the sake of business or something,
right? Or in the truest sense, if you give your gifts, we're often told, in fact, it's probably some cheesy life coach advice I may have given once, but we're told to kind of uncover our gifts and give them freely. And yet we operate in a market-based system where if you give all your gifts away for free, you will starve to death. So that seems like an inherent tension sitting at the heart. And I often feel this tension, right, as well, like in an everyday way. Like I feel like, I really want to give my time and attention to this person here and this person here and this person here. And it's like, actually, Scott, you need to give more of your time and attention to your clients, because they give you money in return for your time and attention. And it's like, it's kind of an obvious thing, right? At the same time, that is an inherent tension I experience, right? How do I navigate that tension in a world that, where living requires financial means most of the time?
And it's hard to maintain that equilibrium if we're being forced outside of it. And this is the whole kind of I guess the hilarious disbalance, and you're kind of seeing more of it, I guess, because it's sort of like if we lived in an environment where it exchanged a very high level of abundance on all levels, you'd probably see behaviors out of people that are more collaborative, more sharing. But we live in an environment that maybe produces more scarcity, and as a result of that, we see more competition, and more ownership. So in terms of out of environmental exchange, there's, on a sociological level, what is producing out of us isn't just, because there's that sort of level of the exchange where, the exchange leads to another part of an exchange. Then that goes to that one, and then that goes to that one, and that goes to that one. I work, therefore I get that money. Then I spend that money on that thing, and then I see what I gain out of that thing, and then the value that thing that I gain. There's these other things that spiral out of it.
it's cool. It's funny actually. Somebody once pointed this out to me, which I thought was maybe just a clever trick, but actually, the word is called currency, and it comes from the Latin for to flow. And
Really?
so
Yeah.
if we think about money, like we start by thinking about money, as you rightly said, like money flows between people and it moves around, and through that movement, you know, we collectively can flourish. You know, but when large amounts of money are sort of gathered up in individuals or hoarded, you know, beyond kind of our needs or our means, that creates this kind of model of scarcity, right? And in fact, economics, I did economics at A-level. I can't say I've thought about it a great deal since doing economics at A-level, but it, you know, it's one of those stepping stones. But the definition of economics, and even sometimes, you know, the definition of politics as well, is like, how do we manage scarce resources, right?
Yeah. It was something.
And so it starts with an idea that like there is not enough to go round. Therefore, that more self-centered behavior is likely to begin at that point, right? Because suddenly it's like, well, if there isn't enough to go around, I better make sure I take not just what I need, but like a little bit extra, because, you know, otherwise there might not be enough. And we have this very scarcity mindset. And you raised it, and I think it's it's really alive for me, and it's an area that I'm increasingly kind of bringing into my coaching and bringing into my work, because it's invading all my thoughts. Is, you know, the natural world of which we are a natural part is kind of not so much, I would say, characterized by scarcity. It is more so characterized by abundance. And so, you know, if you look at the way indigenous populations traditionally might have lived, there is much less of a kind of market-based economy where I own specific things, and much more of a sense of like, oh, nature gives its gifts freely, and as such, if we're going to take the gifts, we have to reciprocate. We have to give those gifts further on, and we sort of pay it forward. Like there's a natural process of that, and that's what sustains the gifts over time. If we take too much, there's not enough for the next harvest, or we deplete soil, or. And so I think, you know, you said we're living in a time where the results of taking too much are becoming more and more obvious for us all to see. And in fact, the big worry for me is that tends to drive more of a scarcity mindset, right? Suddenly it's like, oh my God, like, you know, the environment is degrading and breaking down. I better hoard. You know, we saw it in COVID, right? Hoarding toilet paper, right? You know, like we laugh and we think, God, that was a weird time, right? Where there was no toilet paper on the shelves.
I don't
and we think like, how hard?
As well. That was just like, you know, we haven't even seen what that actually looks like. You know, that kind of level of panic buying, you know, or that kind of thing. Yeah, that kind of you know.
And guess what's interesting about this is, so this conversation came at a really interesting time when you asked me. I was like, yeah, of course I'll be on the podcast. It sounds like an amazing thing to be doing. And then when you said this topic exchange, I was really like, God, wow, it's like the serendipity of it, because I'm listening to a book at the moment which I've read once before, but a long time ago, and I hadn't really understood before. But the book is called Braiding Sweetgrass by Robin Wall Kimura, and it's a really, really amazing book, which weaves together plant wisdom, indigenous ways of thinking, and scientific ways of thinking. So Robin Wall Kimura is a botanist and is also an indigenous Canadian. And so she talks a lot about the way that nature gives gifts and the way that those gifts are intended to be re-given and, you know, passed on. And so this is just like super alive for me right now, this idea that, in that kind of an economy, right? If we put to one side like economics as defined by scarcity, and instead say we have an economics of abundance, right, where the gifts are meant to be given and re-given, and by being re-given, they're enlivened and regenerated, right? In that kind of economy, the currency is not money, but it's like gratitude and reciprocity, you know, so things are given with the intention that they're given to somebody else. So like the very worst thing you can do in our culture like in a kind of more Western consumer culture, is if someone gives you a gift, don't, whatever you do, re-gift it. It's like the big faux pas. Oh my God, you gave my gift away. Like, whereas in a sense, that's what we were intended to do with these gifts. Like, you don't just take an apple and like just eat 100 apples all to yourself until you're sick to your stomach. Like, that's not what they're intended for.
What we've set up for ourselves, this kind of buy and hoard, rather than sort of like, is it available? And I am sort of interested. I mean, I'm interested in what you think, Tom, as in terms of like, because I'm really interested in the whole idea of like making things more available. We don't really want the money. We want availability we want access. We want access to what money can get us. And I'm totally all on that wagon of just like, if we can make things free and available for everyone. But I do understand the exchange of when you invest into something. Like we went to that festival, and like there are obviously a lot of people that would have bought tickets, and therefore they've invested a certain amount of money, so therefore they're going to want to make the most out of the fact that they're going to this festival.
Which one?
On my base. We went for free. But obviously we went for free. So then all those other little activities, because I didn't pay for it, I wasn't necessarily. I felt like I wasn't missing out to not go ahead and do everything. So therefore, there is the investment. So we're interesting. As much as I'm like, make everything for free, I'm kind of also like, there is obviously some kind of exchange. Like when I've exchanged, I've put time to make that money, and therefore it means something for me to be there and invest my time into that. So what do you think? I guess that balance between exchange. Well, what do you think the balance is between exchange and, things being free and things being purchased, I guess?
Yeah, I think the money thing's a really interesting point, and I'd actually be interested to hear Scott's point on this as well as a life coach, because I'm sure you've had similar instances. But I'll answer the question first. So, like, if I look at when I started the agency initially, even when I was freelancing, and I would have some potential clients that I would work with, and I would work with them for free. I would offer them like free kind of advice, free consulting. And you definitely see when people haven't invested something, they don't have some skin in the game, they don't take it so seriously. It's very easy for them to just, life gets in the way, life gets hard. It's like, oh, I don't really want to do this. Whereas if I've spent good money on something, if I've taken out a loan or put something on my credit card, I'm much more invested in actually following through on the advice I've now received. And I think the other thing, though, that I was just thinking as you guys were talking, which I'd never really kind of considered, and when you brought up the topic, Ben, of exchange, that's why I kind of asked you about it. Like, what does that kind of mean to you? Because to me, I was thinking through the kind of, just you give me this, I give you that. But what I found quite interesting is the perspective of, I guess it's almost like we get to choose what an exchange looks like to us.
Yeah.
Right. So like you mentioned, Ben, about like making coffee, you can decide, do I want this exchange to be the enjoyment I'm making coffee in exchange for the enjoyment I get from being in the moment and making coffee?
Yeah. Or
do I want to be making coffee not because I get any sense of enjoyment from it, but because I want to earn money from it? And it's kind of like, I guess as like conscious beings, like it's quite cool that we actually get to decide
attention.
Like, what do we want to get from this exchange? We can choose to get anything from the exchange. It's even like with our relationships with people. Right. Like we can kind of help people do all these altruistic things, and the exchange we can get is maybe a sense of fulfillment. That in itself. And even like to your point about like, even like personal relationships, like people might not be giving anything back, but if you like there, and it's interesting that like, from saying this, because people talk about, selflessness, like I dislike giving because I like, giving. And it's like, well, maybe, but then that's not to say that there might not come a time when you want that exchange to change, and that's fine.
Yeah.
It doesn't make you a bad person from saying, okay, I now want something different from this exchange to what I was getting before.
Yeah.
So I just found that really fascinating. But yeah, I'd love to hear your opinion on that as well, Scott, in terms of like, you know, the financial side, like in terms of like, and if you've seen that if you've done like free work with clients, and how, you know, if they take your advice seriously, you know?
Yeah, it is really interesting. There is a school of thought that says that people should pay, and they should pay because it's a manifestation of how committed they are to the change that they want to see in the world, or usually in themselves. And absolutely, you can 100% be coached, because I do quite a lot of pro bono coaching, coaching for social enterprises, coaching social entrepreneurs, coaching friends or acquaintances or people who just can't pay because of their means. And you do see a varying level of commitment. But I've also had clients who paid large amounts of money and the commitment isn't there. And I think, you know, it's more about the intentionality and the urgency of the change that they're looking for.
Yeah.
So, you know, if somebody really, really needs something to change, they tend to show up in that relationship, regardless of whether they've paid the money.
That's interesting.
And there is something about kind of the directness of the relationship, because I guess one of the reasons I like to work in this manner of coaching, usually one-to-one. I do facilitation of teams and that sort of thing too. But the one-to-one coaching is the transformation or the change that takes place in a coaching relationship happens as a result of what you create in that relationship. So the level of trust, the level of courage, what's possible within that space that the client and the coach are creating together. And so it's really, you know, the exchange there is all about the relationship and the quality of the relationship. So if you know, money can be a distancing device. Like, I give you a lot of money, therefore I don't have to kind of really be in relationship with you. Like, you just, it's very transactional. I keep the relationship at arm's length, in fact. And there can be a lack of commitment there. That, you know, people might say, well, I've only paid this much, I'm not going to go the extra mile. You know, I'm not going to sweat the detail on this job because actually, you know, they're not paying as much as that other client, right? And vice versa. Like, sometimes there's a huge amount of commitment because the relationship is really, really strong, or there's a real trust and belief that the relationship has the power to deliver the change that the person is looking for. And in that case, you know, there might be no money there, and money may not be the kind of medium of exchange, but it might be the quality of the relationship or the possibility of the change actually happening. And so it is interesting, because I think, you know, a lot of the advice around money and around charging and how much you should charge, you know, can come from sort of quite, well, there can be sort of, there's just a lot of different ways to skin that particular cat. You know, you can work out how much money you need to survive on an annual basis, factor in all sorts of, you know, complex equations like healthcare and all the rest of it. You know, you do the big spreadsheet, then you divide all that by how much time you actually want to work, and you say, okay, well, that's my day rate, that's what I cost. You know, but I've been in conversations with clients and been in situations with clients where something has happened that is probably going to change the course of that person's life. And it's very hard to put a monetary figure on that would in any way be adequate. And, you know, I recently did a certification in a particular leadership development measurement tool. And we were talking about money with the guy that was running the certification program. And he said, you know, he was engaged in this like coaching relationship, and it was like €1,000 an hour. And everyone was just like, man, €1,000 an hour. That's like, how is anybody worth €1,000 an hour, was the sort of like the thinking behind it. And he described, you know, an hour he spent sort of mediating this very like complex and broken relationship between the chairman of a large company and the CEO, and this very delicate and beautiful way in which the relationship kind of was mended within this hour. the foundation was laid for something. I mean, €1,000 is absolutely nothing to pay for the fruit that could be born out of the seed sown in that hour. So I have quite an unusual relationship, or maybe it's not unusual, but with this question of value, how much we charge and how much you get. Like money, I think, is quite a poor measure of value a lot of the time.
It's not really actually the money at all. It's really the value of that.
Well,
what it is.
I mean,
to the individual.
we all know what it is as well, right? And I had this conversation again. Somebody, I was due to train with them, and they said, "Oh, how much do you think the training should cost?" And I was a bit like, "Oh, that's an interesting question," because I could really say, "Well, very little, please." But I had to sort of think about it, and I said, my answer was, well, it's a really good question, but I'm not sure I have a good answer, because my relationship with money is such that I've sometimes spent a lot of money on something and it hasn't been very valuable at all. And other times I've spent no money and it's been the most valuable thing ever. Mm-hmm. And he said to me, his name is Charles, lovely guy. He said, "Oh, can you give me an example?" And I said, off the top of my head, without thinking about it, and I sort of blurted it out. And afterwards I was like, "Oh, what a weird thing to say." But I said, "Oh, my mum died 15 years ago." And I said, "It's probably been the most valuable thing that's happened in my life. But if you asked me to put a monetary value on it, it would be absolutely impossible." So I don't know if money is a particularly, for me, it doesn't feel like a very definitive way to value things. Yeah. And we operate in an environment where life coaches get paid a certain amount. If you do executive leadership coaching, the rate goes up. If you coach people who, make lots of money, they tend to have more money to pay you. And by the way, if you walk into a big client, you'd probably know this, Tom, as well, massive company comes along and you charge them a tiny rate. In their head, they might be thinking, this guy doesn't really get it. Do we really want to be working with an agency who think that our business is worth that little money?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. We actually lost a deal. Like when we first set up the agency, it was just me and Jane at the time. There was a really big client we had. They did about 1.6 billion in revenue. Wow. And I had no idea, like, what do you charge someone like that? They wanted a new website built, right? So, me and Jane were like speaking about it. We were like, oh God. And at the time, like we were charging like £500 to build a website, right? So we were like, I don't know, should we charge like $5,000, like 10 grand? And, in the end, like I was really brave and I was like, all right, I'm going to charge 50 grand, right? And I was like, oh my God, they're never going to say yes to this. Put like 50 grand quote forward, and the guy came back, and the guy, I like had a really good relationship with this guy who's their marketing director, their global marketing director. And he, we got on a call afterwards, and he was like, look, Tom, he's like, all these other quotes came in at like £500,000. So that they saw your quote and he just brought everything into question. It was kind of like, and I didn't really know what to say.
Good thing you didn't do 5,000.
Yeah, and that's the thing, right? It's like I think our relationship and our perception of value, and especially financial exchange, can be very skewed. And to your point earlier, Scott, as well, about like that example you gave, where it's more about the value people get from things are going to be wildly different. There's that. Have you ever heard that? There's that kind of story slash analogy of that kind of like, I think it's like an engineer on there's a production line that breaks down. Have you heard that one?
Yeah, he charges them like 100,000. He goes like 100,000 for like banging it with a hammer. He's like, well, banging it with a hammer costs like £1, and
knowing which part to bang with the hammer is
and
X amount. And that's,
what I think is so cool about this part of the conversation too is like, and it actually echoes exactly what you opened with, Ben, is like this word that we think we understand, right? Exchange, this thing that we're engaged in all the time, like unthinkingly we're exchanging all the time.
This call and response.
It's so complex, right? It's much more very complex. Fluid. Yeah, and I think what's really cool about it is so two things. One is like we're always being invited into some kind of relationship around every exchange, right? It might be a relationship of distance, like I'm going to give you the money, just get the fuck out of my face, sort of thing. I don't want to have a conversation. Or it might be like there's no money, And then we really have to have a conversation about, okay, well, what's in it for you? What's in it for me? How do we, work in this gift economy maybe? So that's one thing, is like, actually we're always being I think exchange is like inviting us into relationship. And so you can do that more mindfully, with more attention, and I think maybe the other thing is knowing that it's then this question of like, how am I choosing to give my attention or to enter into an attentional relationship with something. And that's like, for me as a coach, that's the thing I'm most interested in actually is probably like choice and freedom. I'm really interested in this question of like, where does choice and freedom lie for us, and how do people experience more of a sense of freedom, getting unstuck from whatever makes them feel stuck, right? And so I think when we come into this idea of like, oh, actually I have choices, I can choose to kind of trade my time for large amounts of money. And as a result, I'm sort of owned to some extent, and I may have other like limitations on my time as a result of, the expectation, the obligations that are created by this particular exchange. Alternatively, I might choose to live in a communal relationship with a number of different families where cooking, growing of food and harvesting of food is a shared kind of capacity. As a result, a lot of the time I might not have things to do because other people are doing those things. And so again, I'm choosing to be in a very different form of set of relationships where exchange is taking place nonetheless all the time. And there may be other upsides or downsides. For some people, it would be a nightmare to live in a sort of communal environment because we live in a very kind of individualized way. And for other people, they're choosing the more communal thing. Right, yeah. But the choice at the heart of it is, in a way, what I find interesting is that, and on that, by the way, like, perhaps it's important to say that choice is not like neutral, like, oh, I could either choose to participate in this financial way or in a gift economy, because it's not neutral, because like everything is financialized in our system. And so to operate in ways that are non-financially transactional, where exchange is not like that, that's actually much harder.
That's exactly what I mean by like, so when we say exchange, I think this is why it's sort of like you both pondered on it for a bit, because it is exactly that. I think we had this idea of exchange. You're like, what are you talking about? You're going to talk about, but there is this exchange that's continuously happening. Like I generally think like as we make things more, machine automation takes over a lot of jobs, I genuinely believe that people will offer their time towards community jobs because they realize that it's something that they get to offer. So it's nothing to do with the money. When you realize that, like, all right, you live in an environment that now takes care of you and you don't need to work so much, you are obviously going to want to offer your time towards something. And I think if it's going to be a job that doesn't pay you, you're going to want to offer it to something that's kind of helping. You're going to want to offer it towards that kind of collaboration. And for me, like, even with like paintings, you do these paintings, you think of this idea and you're going to sell them for thousands of pounds or something. I was like, but I'd actually really like to get to the point where maybe I'm making enough money somewhere else that the paintings I actually would either give away to an individual or to a community that I feel would benefit most off of the subject, what the painting is about. Because the painting is always about a subject, and it's great if that connects to an individual and someone really, that resonates with them and they want it. That's lovely, and I still would like to give it away to an individual. But I think like if I've done loads of research on a subject, it'd be great if I could actually just gift the painting, because it's about the subject. It's about the exchange of giving that information to the people that I feel would benefit most from the subject. Because if I'm just selling a painting and I sell it for thousands of pounds and it's just going to some guy that's building up his new art collection, the exchange of the subject is lost. It becomes entirely transactional. And this is a relationship of how I think most of us are kind of conditioned to think, is that it's the exchange of what in return, not the exchange of the subject. The
interesting thing about that, Ben, like with art as well, and this is where I suppose, like we talked about it being really fluid, is it's almost like, if you look at some of the not maybe consequences is the wrong word, but like, let's say somebody has, been gifted your art, they might then hang that art on their wall and feel really inspired from the art in an exchange they have. Yeah. And from that inspiration, they then start a business which generates the money. It's kind of like there's this never ending like just sequence of different forms of exchange that manifest in different ways. It's so interesting. Like I'm really liking this because I've never really looked at it in this way before. But even, like you mentioned about even, I guess things like even like a tree, right? Like a tree is exchange, like it's pulling in carbon dioxide from outside and exchanging oxygen back into the world. It's like even these things that we would never really consider with the word exchange. The animal kingdom, like to your point, Scott, about that book, like plants, like everything is and the word you used earlier, Ben, of like this kind of homeostasis point, like everything exists in this like balance and this equilibrium. And then I guess it comes back to what you guys were talking about earlier in like when we're taking and we're kind of shifting then that equilibrium because there's not enough, like, I guess it's almost like, if we're going to just take from the world, and for a lot of us, we're not putting anything back into the world. We're not planting new seeds. We're not planting new trees. We're not. So then the balance is off. It's really interesting how many
there's
different
a word as well, isn't
forms.
it? I think for the time. So what is it? I can't actually remember what the word is, but there's a time for it that so let's say you use a plant and then you could be like, but we planted new ones. But you actually also need to calculate the time that it takes for that thing to grow back. It's, exchange in relation to time in the same way that I could invest. I could be like, there are exchanges that are happening instantly in return, like this conversation, exchanging in knowledge, we're feeding off each other. And there's another exchange where I do something and I don't mind to see anything for years, because I could work on a painting for years. And I think I remember having a chat with you, Scott, about this, about having a relationship with clients that will go on for a very long time, and I guess because some of them they'll be like, look, I just want to do this thing, and you help them out, relatively quickly. But then there are some that are a long journey, and it's also about how do you feel about that exchange mentally. Physically, it's time. It's the exchange of your own,
Yeah, and I guess for me, it comes a little bit back to this idea when we think of ourselves as a very scarce resource, we tend to get a bit like protective of our time naturally, and we ask questions like, "Oh my God, is this person taking too much of my time as a client, or am I giving too much to them?" And it's a really natural way to feel, I think, not least because we're surrounded by incessant messaging that tells us we don't have enough everywhere, and I worked in the advertising industry for 10 plus years, and so not just the advertising industry, but that's one of the places in the world where we're really focused on messages that encourage people to focus on what they don't have, as a means to get them to buy things basically and fuel the kind of commodity economy. So it's again not a kind of even playing field, if you will. It's not just simply that we're choosing to kind of be focused on financial exchange over other forms of exchange. It's that we're kind of fighting an uphill battle to think of ourselves as also abundant. And you mentioned trees, Tom, and I think it's like the perfect example in a way. And I'll give another example that I think is been in my head as we've been talking. But trees are like amazing ecosystem producers, right? They are given a bunch of free gifts like light, water, air, nutrients from the soil. These are like just freely given to trees, and they turn those gifts into, like, they exchange those gifts into like leaves, flowers, fruit, sap, other kind of things, and then those gifts are in turn given away freely, so bees come to pollinate the plants, they come for the nectar of the flowers, but they go away with pollen, which in turn pollinates other plants. And So there is this kind of endless reciprocity that exists in the natural world. And that's why the natural world is naturally regenerative, because there is this inherent gift giving, this inherent mode of exchange that does not hoard things. In fact, if you get an overabundance of something, generally it rots or it goes away, or it creates an overabundance of other things. Like if you take out a keystone predator from an ecosystem, you'll find a proliferation of grazing animal probably, and those grazing animal will graze more extensively and they'll deplete the grass to such a point where there is not enough grass to sustain the grazing animal. And so
it's wild how the smallest thing can have such a...
But interestingly, these feedback loops are like in a system whereby they self-regulate eventually, right? And so we seem to be the only species on the planet that is not capable of this form of like ongoing self-regulation. We take more than we need. We don't give back. In fact, what we give back is often poisonous or problematic. And so, there is this like real challenge there. And yet, and this is the example that popped into my head when I was thinking about this question of like abundance and scarcity. We're told to feel like there's not enough time, money, attention, energy, all of these things. Yet, as we've been on this call nonstop, we're just breathing in, breathing out, breathing in, breathing out. It's in this beautiful relationship of reciprocity. Like if you only breathe in for a while, you just can't do it. If you only breathe out, again, it can't sustain. So there is this very natural form of like endless reciprocity, which we know so deeply in our neurobiology, and yet, we're surrounded by messaging that teaches us otherwise. And so, it's not an argument to say we should all give everything away for free and expect the gifts to just flow back in. But it's maybe a challenge to this idea that, there's not enough to go round. And, the way the gift economy works is we give the gifts in I guess in a way in the wish or in the knowledge that those gifts will be given on to other people. And in turn, we will receive gifts.
Yeah, and it doesn't need to be anything of any similar relation, I guess. And
that's
it's the way that it spreads out into such a vastness, isn't it?
And it's interesting when you were talking, Ben, as well. I think that I agree. I'm not sure I agree entirely that the future will be techno-utopian, and I don't think you do either, actually. But I think there is a variation of the future where we have different means of exchange.
Yeah.
And barter feels like it will become more relevant once again, right? Yeah. Rather, where working to exchange your time and labor for money becomes less relevant, where machines are doing significant amounts of labor. Then the question arises, okay, like, I have gifts, but there's no market for me to trade those gifts in the same way as I used to. I mean, we actually see this already with freelancer rates being pushed down, and it gets harder and harder for people to exchange their services when there are other forms that can deliver that work at a much cheaper rate. In which case, then maybe we barter. Maybe I say, okay, there isn't a monetary value to my coaching, but what if I coach you and in return you create art for me? And that's a really interesting conversation. I think it's one that we are probably out of practice at having.
Yeah.
But it isn't that long ago in our history as humans on this planet that this was the dominant mode of exchange. And so I wonder, whether we'll cycle back to that and where we'll cycle back to that. And as with all things, it's already happening somewhere in the world right now, right? I think talking about technology in the future, William Gibson said, the future's already here, it's just not evenly distributed. And so somewhere right now, there's a separate conversation going on with a bunch of people who are living in a barter economy or a gift economy, thinking like, I wonder if we'll ever go back to trading things for money.
Yeah, because the whole kind of
all of these things are cyclical, aren't they? Like much of life is just cyclical.
Yeah.
And it exists. Those cycles just exist over different timelines. You know, there's that whole kind of school of thought that, you know, maybe our planet, you know, there's all this kind of all of these things in the world that kind of seem to suggest that there was a kind of civilization before. You know, when you look at like Egyptians and the pyramids and things, it's like, how did they have that technology? You know, and totally. I heard someone talking on a podcast recently about the fact that, you know, there's all this talk of like nuclear war and things, and it's like, maybe that is a cycle. Maybe we just like blow each other up and then we start again. And it's like, right. and that's why there are signs of more advanced civilizations than you'd think are otherwise possible, because we're just going through these cycles. And again, those cycles could be short in terms of like a human lifespan over 100 years. They could be hundreds of thousands of years, you know,
or on a, you know, I think, you know, on a much bigger, geological or cosmic scale as well. You know, humans are just a very, very small, you know, it's very, very short in terms of the relationship with, you know, Robin Wall Kimmerer actually, it says at one point in her book, which I think is beautiful, she says, you know, humans are like the most recent creatures here, you know, and they know the least, you know, and actually, you know, trees, for example, have, you know, billions of years of knowledge stored up, and but we've fallen out of the ways of listening to the wisdom that's maybe stored up in other species, because we've kind of started to realize that maybe, I would think erroneously, that we are like the dominant species, therefore we're the smartest, and we look at people living, you know, more closely to the land, for example, as though they're like, oh, they haven't become civilized yet, they have yet to learn the ways of, you know. I guess
it's all through like this humanistic lens. That's what we're all looking at it through.
Absolutely.
It's all human storytelling. It's all, you know, through that narrative. It's like we spoke about language and communication last time. It's all through that frame of thinking, that you're not even allowing the spaces that there is a variety of different complexes.
And it's also not like, because there's this like almost like a, you know, like a moral side to this as well, where it's like, oh, that's the right way, that's the wrong way, and it's kind of like, it just is what it is, right? It's like I think I told you about that game that I played a little while ago, Ben, the Talos Principle, which is basically like, you know, it's this AI civilization which has kind of taken over after humanity has managed to wipe itself out somehow. And the AI has supposedly like learned from humans, like not to kind of reproduce too much, and to, you know, not to operate in this form of exchange, and to not be selfish, to work as a community and work together. And then, you know, naturally, like as time goes on, like these AIs and they're kind of, you know, robots in this form in the game, they start to have their own desires and think like, yeah, but what's out there? And they want to explore new lands, you know, as humanity did, right? When we conquered new worlds and things like that, they're getting all of those same desires, because there's just this kind of inherent pursuit, you know, whatever that is. It's just almost just like a constant need for evolution, you know, whether you call it evolution. And again, we're kind of talking at it now through the lens of like, it almost seems like, you know, we've got to this stage in our evolution maybe where it seems like previous civilizations are actually living much, quote unquote, better than we were by living off the land. But then they're looking at us saying, well, if they could imagine us, they were looking at, you know, what the future could be like, saying, oh, imagine if we could, you know, have all these different lands and have places we could live in and have shelter. And it's, you know, it's wild. It's just so
we tend to romanticize, I think, the way people lived before, as though it's like somehow better or simpler. But even if we're not romanticizing it, I think there's something in that. Even when we talk longingly about, you know, something that we feel like we've lost, I think it's a yearning. It's a yearning for something. It's not like I want to live like a peasant in the 14th century. You know, it's it's more like, well, I want a simpler life, or I want, so I think there is you can't just dismiss it as like rose-tinted spectacles or something like that. I think we're actually longing for something different than what we have at the moment. And I think in part that's because a lot of what we have at the moment is leaving us, if you look at the world, quite sick, quite broken, quite depleted. Look at our soils, look at our ecosystems, look at ourselves as humans, look at the waters, the land. A lot of it is being degraded and not replenished. It's not regenerating. And so I think when we hearken after, we yearn for like, the simple days of, or even on this call, when we talk about indigenous wisdom, and you hear a lot more about this, I think it's not just a simple kind of trying to find other stories to tell that seem better than what we've got right now. I think it's a yearning for something. And for me, it's like, I think we are intended to be in relationship with each other. We're intended to feel a sense of connection and a sense of belonging. And it's those things which are amiss at the moment. We're sort of made to feel like we're not connected to ourselves, that we're disconnected from each other, that we're disconnected from nature. And this it's I forget who the author is, but it's often referred to as the story of separation. And I think when we talk about land-based cultures, or we talk about our grandparents and how great it was when they were alive, even when we talk about our parents' generation having more affordable housing or something like that, I think in a sense we're also longing for more of a sense of connection around the things that we're doing. And it's obviously the great irony is that we live in the most connected time of all time, and yet a lot of that is creating a deep sense of disconnection from the things that have traditionally nourished us, which is not just soil or those things, but also like belonging. Like, in fact, it's so perfect, right? Stony Point, beautiful, wonderful establishment that it is, that brought us into this podcast, into this relationship of exchange, has painted on its window in, I don't know, 8-foot high letters at the moment. We need each other. And it's, it's so true. We really need each other, and not because there's money to be made or there's, goods to be exchanged. That's not the primary reason. We are meant to be, and we are always, whether we have forgotten it or not, in a relationship of interdependence. Like, our thriving, our success, our ability to survive is dependent on us all, right? And so when we live in this story of separation, that's where we get ourselves into some really like gnarly problems: loneliness, dissatisfaction, emptiness. It's possible, when we're disconnected from other humans, to characterize them as somehow non-human or other than us. And we all know where that leads. That leads to some really gnarly stuff that humans have perpetrated against each other. And we do the same with the natural world. Nature's just, it's over there somewhere, but I don't have to think about it when I'm buying my, pre-packed, plastic wrapped stuff, right? And I don't have to think about how the repercussions of the industry that is created to deliver food 365 days a year from around the world to my plate. There are lots of negative externalities that they're called, because we externalize them from our balance sheet. We look at it. My balance sheet as I'm eating my food is like, oh, I'm putting healthy food in my body. This is great. This is great. But am I taking into account the cost of that food? Well, not to the environment, probably not to the communities that are not served as a result of like large supermarkets, et cetera, et cetera. So I think coming into this exchange for me is all about this relationships, and this question of like, who do we see ourselves in relationship with? And if we can widen the circles, there's a beautiful author, wonderful author called Joanna Macy, and her body of work is called The Work That Reconnects. She has a book called Coming Back to Life, and in that book there's a practice as part of her body of work called widening circles, which is about kind of seeing ourselves as fundamentally already in relationship with ever wider circles, and recognizing that because I am in a relationship with the river, whether I see it on a daily basis or whether I drink from the river, I'm in a relationship with it. And if I allow harm to come to the river through my actions, that is also something that I am responsible for and accountable for. And so I think sometimes when we talk about like exchange bringing us into relationship, we often still think about it from the perspective of like, oh, I'm in a relationship. Cool. What do I get from that relationship? But relationships come with like obligations as well as like rights, and benefits. They come with like things that we need to do. We are accountable in relationship. And I think it's that disconnect, right? We want the relationships that just give us, but we don't really want to be accountable for all the messy stuff that happens on the outside of the relationship. So I think, yeah.
It's interesting though. I think it's a really interesting and important part, to think about also, and this is what's come up and hopefully is coming up for anyone listening to this conversation, is the different ways in which we can also receive, because a lot of the time people think like, well, I don't have the time, the energy, or the money to widen my circles and think about these other things. I don't have the time to give back. I don't have the money to give back to these other things. And, I'm busy, I'm strapped, I can't afford these things. But it's like when you won those, you also get back much more as well in exchange. And maybe it's not always in some ways it might be financial, other ways it might be just a sense of like purpose or fulfillment or joy or whatever it is. And I think again it's what to bring it back to like earlier on in this conversation, it's one of the really interesting things of like how our attention, like you mentioned, Ben, where our attention goes will dictate like the form of exchange we're getting from something. Because if you are doing like any activity, like making coffee, like you said, you could choose like not to be focused. You could be thinking about how little you're getting paid for making coffee and be in a very negative state. Or you could think about how lucky I am to make coffee and really be in the moment and just receiving like the gifts that is giving you, the coffee is giving you, the process of making coffee, the enjoyment. And that comes down to like where you're placing your attention. So it's almost like, we have this choice in all of these exchanges in terms of what do we want to do? We want this to be a positive exchange or a negative exchange?
And you could even have a negative exchange come back to you. You might even actually give a positive exchange and then get a negative exchange back. But that's also about how you're processing, how you process the negative exchange that comes back to you. Because you could take that in plenty of ways. As it comes back to you, you could take that and let it crush you, or you could actually let it be something like, okay, able to tackle through it way better. Sometimes those negative things are often way better than the positive exchange back to you. I mean, like you said, with your mum dying, that was actually a really profound thing.
Yeah, I mean, it was a definite negative. You'd say like you'd rather that didn't happen. But if you on balance look at the way it's shaped my life, what it's given me, it was a huge gift, and continues to be a gift. And I think there is something here about time as well, right? Like as a coach, like here's the funny thing: if you're in like a coaching session and somebody's just like, oh my God, they're having like this big aha moment, and you're like, oh yeah, fuck, I'm a really good coach. Look how great that is. Like I played a hand in that, right? Your ego can really get attached to like there's change happening here, and I'm part of it. But your ego doesn't tend to sit there late at night thinking, I wonder if I've totally screwed up this person in 20 years' time because, and so we tend to really fixate on like what we can see, what's directly there. Yeah. And we assess like, oh, that's either good or it's bad. And there's like an old Chinese like story proverb that's like, who's to say whether it's good or bad? Like time sort of tells. The things that we encounter now and we think, oh my God, the worst thing ever, could actually be, a gift in disguise. And this ability to kind of see the gift in things, and to kind of allow for the fact, in a way, if you imagine, right, that at its core, it's all a gift, right? You didn't ask for half of the gifts you're given, but you're just going to get them anyway, right? In the same way as, the gift of the air, I don't have to prostrate myself on the ground and beg for the air or beg for water and some of these things. These gifts are given really, really freely. And so, to some extent, we're always in receipt of gifts, and we can, as a result, I think the point that you're raising, Tom, and that Ben, you've highlighted too, is we can choose to be in a relationship with gratitude, with the gifts that every morning you wake up, it's like, oh, shit, I woke up today. Like, that's a gift, man. That's a big gift. Plenty of people tomorrow will not wake up. Mm-hmm. Each breath, oh, I'm still alive. Shit, that's a pretty cool gift as well, right?
That's exactly it. There's no real guarantee of tomorrow, right?
No.
We can sort of like, it's like, you're driving on a dark road. You sort of feel like probably there is more road ahead of you.
Right.
But there might not be.
Yeah, right.
It might be past the light. It just ends,
And I think if we can stay in this relationship of gratitude in exchange, right, then I think there's a lot of potential within that. And I feel like if you're in that relationship of gratitude in the exchange, I don't know whether this is true or not. Maybe there's some experiment we'll have to try. We'll all go away and try it out. When you're giving or when you're receiving, just being in the energy of gratitude, I sort of trust that somehow that energy will encourage the other person to give that gift on. So if I have a great exchange with somebody, or I go to Stony Point and I just have a really great exchange with Ben, like I go away from that place energized, invigorated, bouncy and bubbly, probably with some new ideas and thoughts in my head. The next person I encounter is the person who is the beneficiary of the gift, as much as I was, right? Because the energy I bring into that next relationship is buoyed and shaped by this gift that was given. So I can be in a relationship of gratitude with the gifts that I'm given, and I think if I am, I'm more likely to give them on. And that's the thing. It's like currency. We want it to flow. We want the gratitude to be given and received and given and received, and just in that relationship all the time of giving and receiving. And when we start to receive, but kind of withhold or not really give back, that's where the challenge comes in, and I guess it's a challenge for all of us, right? I'm doing, the same thing. I'm withholding. I'm clinging on to emotional energy. I'm holding on to ideas. I'm keeping knowledge tightly guarded, so I can trade it for money. So I think we're all sucked into this kind of scarcity mindset. And the more that we can imagine that by giving this stuff with an attitude of gratitude, as they sometimes say, there's almost like this it's almost willing it forward, right? I'm going to give this to you with loads of gratitude, positive energy, and I'm not going to tell you what to do with it because that's not my job, but I'm just going to trust that somehow with this energy, you're more likely to give that on. In the same way as the things we've spoken about in this conversation, they're new to me. I'm more likely to give the gift of this conversation on to other people as a result of having had it. You guys inviting me into this opportunity to share a conversation. There's, you could have said, it'll be good exposure for you, Scott. We'll talk about your life coaching, but so it's going to cost you a little bit of money. And I would be like, right, okay, well, suddenly my mindset shifts. I'm like, well, is it worth it? Should I give my time? My time's worth more than that. No, I can't. Well, but you've invited me into this generous gift. I've given my time freely in a gift, and I hope the energy of this conversation is a gift to other people. I can't guarantee it will be, but I trust in a way that given freely, there will be moments in this conversation that might be gifts that people take on. And hopefully, here's the kind of, to the listeners, give them away. Give it away as much as possible,
Yeah, that's exactly it. And I guess that's exactly it. It's about, getting the real fruits out of these exchanges. Whereas are you, this is it, is a large amount of your attention going on stuff that's not necessarily giving you a lot back. It's the same if I'm in the coffee shop and I'm putting a large amount of energy in. Am I aware that I'm spending too much energy? And I'm very good at that now. I think I've done it for a long time. Suddenly, if I'm spending too much, I'm talking. I'm like, hey, I'm trying to be entertaining for you, and then I'm exhausting too much. I'm not getting it back. Then I finish and I'm tired. You should I think an art of even those kind of jobs or just interacting with people is you should be able to leave and actually feel like I felt good. Because you've got the balance right. You're aware of how you're actually feeling, and if I don't suddenly feel like I don't want to talk, then you don't need to talk.
Right.
I can put my attention somewhere else, and that's creating that equilibrium where suddenly, like, I'm not exhausting my energy, I'm not spending too much, and therefore you can continuously flow a little bit better.
What I love is you hit the nail on the head. It's like noticing when we might be out of balance in our own, attention, and bringing ourselves into balance as well. Is this process of homeostasis? It naturally happens anyway. All these ecosystems are so complex, yet they somehow manage to always like figure shit out, right? Over a long enough time frame, it's incredible, like what's possible. And it's the same is true for us, but we have to intentionally kind of sometimes be like, oh, I'm kind of giving too much here and I'm getting depleted. I need to look after myself. Mm-hmm. There's something I want to introduce. I need to say it because, again, listening to Robin Wall Kimmerer in this book, Braiding Sweetgrass, she said something and it was just like absolutely perfect. She describes, and I'm reading it now because I want to try and get it right, so you'll have to excuse me, but she says, living by the precepts of the honorable harvest. And I was like, what is this thing called an honorable harvest? This is just like too good. She said, take only that which is given, use it well, be grateful for the gift, and reciprocate the gift. Like these principles, right? Like take only what is given. Don't take more than you need or more than the person has to give, but just take only what's given, use it well. So like, to your point, Ben, make the most of it. Don't just like discard it. Oh, someone's given you this precious gift of their time and attention, mm-hmm. or this beautiful moment with you, and you just like, oh, whatever. No, use it well. Come into a beautiful attentional relationship with that thing. Be present for it. Love it. Cherish it. Be grateful for it in this way. Like, oh yeah, man, I can't believe I'm having this conversation. It's so cool. And then just reciprocate. Give it away. Like go into the next conversation and think like, how can I be just as generous? How can I take only that which is given, and so I love, this is like, she's using it to describe harvest. In fact, she's talking about like harvesting pecan nuts actually at the time, but it's just like, this idea, these ideas are very natural ideas. They're natural to humans. They are natural to other, and more than human creatures, and we've just kind of forgotten some of these principles. So I really feel like there's going to be a moment on a bigger global scale. We're sort of out of balance right now, right? The way we're living is kind of out of whack. So I feel like there will be a natural reset coming of sorts, where we'll come into more of a relationship where there's a more honorable harvest going on, taking only that which is given, using it well, being grateful for the gifts and reciprocating the gifts. And, like, that's not just like on the big, like global ecosystem, financial capital market. That's like you and I can probably do that better every day. Like I can go out and try and be better at that today. I can be more grateful. I can kind of, not kind of take more than I need. I can really make use of the things I have, be in that relationship of gratitude, and I can really just try and pay it forward, So I think that's definitely like, that's alive for me.
I'm thinking my kind of devil's advocate brain has been going off now. So we've been talking about gratitude, saying like, there's somebody listening to this right now saying, screw you guys. Like I'm having the shittest year. And and their life probably does suck, like it's probably true. Mm-hmm. I'm really interested to hear your thoughts, Scott, as a life coach. Yeah. I'm sure you come up with these kind of situations a lot where somebody is in a really shitty place, and the last thing you can say to them is just be grateful. just wake up and do some gratitude in the morning. Like, fuck you, Scott.
Yeah.
Fuck you.
and hey, and it's such a good question. And gratitude. I am a strong believer that gratitude is almost always possible. And like, so I'll come back to the directness of your question, because I really love it actually, Tom. Like to this case of like when things are really, really shit, right? How can we be with people in a way that's like useful rather than telling them to like cheer up and be grateful, like, which is just really not. We've all been there, right? That's not helpful at all.
It's like my only approach, to be honest. Like, you mean you need me to just be?
I know, terrible.
But I think so. So there is this thing. So Viktor Frankl, was a survivor of the death camps, and he has this book, Man's Search for Meaning. You know,
it's a great book.
And you know, in a way, like, not to. I mean, first of all, go out and read that book. It's an incredible book. It's a life-changing book, kind of perspective that unfortunately one person and many millions of people, in fact, had to have. But out of it has been given this incredible gift of Viktor Frankl's work. And in that book, he talks about that we don't get to choose what happens to us effectively, but we get to choose what we do with what happens to us. So the material circumstances of our life are very changeable. And however great they seem right now, they may not be always like that. And however bad they seem right now, they may not be always like that as well. But we can choose the relationship that we're having with that situation. I firmly believe that, whilst also recognizing that it's not always possible to feel like you're in a position of choice, right? You may not think, oh yeah, well, I'll just choose something different. I'll choose to think differently about it. You know, it's not always possible. And so we have to hold that idea with a great deal of compassion. And for the people that are suffering, I think the most important thing to do is to come into a relationship with that suffering. So, you know, to turn to be with the pain. And crucially, like here's the thing, right? Because I think partially because we're so atomized in this way that we're living, we're so individualized, you know, 10 houses in a row, each one of them buying their groceries separately, each one of them buying their individual prepackaged sort of servings for one sort of thing. Like, that's very much where we're at. That we tend to think, oh, you know, if I'm suffering, I have to somehow like come into a relationship solely on my own with my suffering, turn to face my suffering in this like individually heroic way. And I actually think, you know, that's part of the reason why we need each other, because some things are much bigger and more difficult to be with. And actually we just need to be together around those things, not in a relationship of fixing or of trying to make that suffering go away, but just in a relationship of compassion, actually, which, by the way, compassion literally comes from the root of the word. The etymology is to suffer with. And so when we're in a relationship of compassion with somebody, we're choosing to kind of empathetically really connect to the place where they are, not try and move them away from it or make it go away or fix their pain, but just to recognize it. And it's why in that situation, in a kind of coaching perspective, often sometimes this will be talked about, like all sorts of ways to talk about it, like might talk about process coaching or something like this, but you're trying to be in a very spacious relationship with the thing as it is. You're not thinking, oh, you know, quickly, like, feel grateful about something and then you won't feel pain. It's like, okay, well, come into a real relationship with the thing as it is. Like, your circumstances may be fucking shitty. They might be really, really hard. You might be in great deal of physical pain, for example, right now. You know, how can you relate to that pain? You know, and how can we collectively come together around your pain and recognize that when you're suffering, I'm suffering too. And so we can carry some of that together. We know that kind of slightly twee phrase, you know, problem shared is a problem halved sort of thing. But I think there's a great deal of truth in it. It's a cliche for a reason. You know, when we realize we're not separate from each other, and that, you know, the pain of my loved one is my pain as well, you know, so we share in that pain already, and we can share in the cessation of that suffering. In the Buddhist term, you know, there is a way for us to be with suffering and to kind of skillfully, in a way, be with suffering together, so that, you know, we can suffer less. But it starts from a foundational belief that we're all suffering. You know, not like, I'm all right, I'm super happy, I'm fine, so that's good. Okay, yes, that is good. And there may be others who are suffering. So how can we relate to them? Not trying to fix that, make the pain go away automatically, or just gloss it over with, hey, let's put a veneer of gratitude on the top and suddenly it'll all feel better. But how can we actually turn to be with that pain? Again, from a compassion point of view, maybe we can't. Maybe now's not the time to be able to face into the pain. Maybe I'm suffering too much. So again, like, what's here now? How can we come into a relationship of truth with the situation as we find it? And, you know, the other thing that I'm kind of really curious about is how can we ask for help? You know, we have this very, like, I'm curious about this because I'm very guilty of this. I'm quite self-reliant. You know, if I'm struggling or I'm suffering, I'll often be like, I'll figure it out. You know, I'll come up with a clever way to, you know, I'll meditate, or I'll do something that I know is nourishing and good for me. And, you know, I have all these tricks or tools I'm using. And sometimes the answer is like, you don't have to carry it all alone. And maybe you weren't intended to carry it all alone. Maybe the answer is like, oh, hi, I'm really struggling. Can you help? And again, yeah, there's a great gift in asking for help, you know, because you give the person this opportunity to come into a relationship with you, an exchange of support and care that's nourishing for them just as it is for you. And so I think, you know, there is a really important, you know, part of it, which is like being in a kind of healthy or useful relationship, even with the things as they are, not wishing them away or hoping for sunny skies ahead, or, you know, somehow living in the future or the past, pushing the reality of this present moment away. You know, how can we come back to this present moment? Maybe we can't individually, but maybe we collectively can support ourselves and each other to be more present with the way things are, whether it's pain or joy. You know, joy is a really hard one to be with for most people. They're so worried about it going away that it's like, oh, joy, oh shit, too vulnerable. Yeah. Brene Brown talks about, you know, foreboding joy. The fact that when we experience real sense of joy, we kind of like then quickly have like a really negative thought, like, oh yeah, this landscape is so beautiful, it's so great. Yeah, but it's all going to die.
It's never going to last.
You know, and so we tend to curtail our own joy in that same way. Well, what would it look like for us to be present for joy? What would it look like for us to be present for our pain?
I guess it's the awareness of, you know, you can put it's the awareness of, like, you can shine that light, you know, your attention on pain, and you can put the same attention on happiness. But nonetheless, it's the attention. Where are you sitting? Where is that being seen? There's that simplicity. So you will experience all those emotional states, but it's actually there's the simplicity of just like, I am looking at this thing.
And I'm choosing to focus on it, right? Like in one way, it's like the ultimate dick move if somebody's experiencing a really shitty time, to be like, cheer up, you know. And in another way, it's fantastic advice.
Yeah.
Now, it doesn't always land as fantastic advice, and it's never really as easy as that sounds. And in another way, it's really easy. You know,
I think everyone on this podcast right now we're all the ones that give like, don't worry, it's all gonna be okay advice.
No, yeah. And but it's hard, right? Like, life is continually asking us questions, and most of the time we don't really have the answer.
Yeah.
And that makes us feel pretty crappy a lot of the time.
I was going to say, like, it's an interesting thought to just reflect on that, our relationship with suffering or joy is, you know, and either way you look at it, whether it's our relationship to our own suffering or our relationship to somebody else's suffering, is very often through the lens of, I need to fix this suffering. Or to your point, Scott, about Brené Brown, like, you know, I need to cling on to this joy.
Right.
That's the relationship we have to joy and suffering, and that creates, it's almost like the expression of fighting fire with fire. Right? We're not just being. They're very, very hard things to be with. Whether it's our own or with someone else's. Ben, like, to your point, and I'm really guilty of this as well. It's like, it's such a bad habit, and I try to be more conscious of it now. But, you know, if somebody's suffering with something, I'll always be like, oh, how can I fix this? And I was just thinking as well as you were talking, Scott, and you were saying about like knowing what we need sometimes, and it's like, you know, my ex-partner was amazing at this. She always used to like say, probably because it got to the stage where she just had to, because I was being so frustrating. But she would say to me, like, I just need you to like listen to me. Like, I don't need advice. I just need you to listen. Like, that's something. And to your point, Scott, like, I think I'm quite similar in the sense that I will often be like, oh, I'll just meditate. I'll just do this. I've got all these things that work for me. It's a very hard thing. A very brave thing to say to someone, like, I just need you to, like, I just want to talk to you. Like, I don't want advice. I just want you to kind of be here with me. like as I'm going through this.
Or to take your point as well, Tom, like sometimes rather than busying ourselves with meditation or some other thing, we just need to listen to ourselves and what's going on for ourselves. But that's hard too, right? And so I think, we need to hold all of this with a really, really just kind of give it a big hug, because it's bloody hard, and it's tiring. And, some of us are incredibly privileged to have time to be able to spend on some of this stuff, or to feel nourished enough, or to have the means that we can dedicate some time to our well-being, for example. And many don't have that too. And so I think there is, it's not so simple as it sounds, because where we find ourselves is often not well resourced, or not feeling like we have capacity. And I think that's another reason why it's so valuable and important for us to kind of think about exchange in a much broader sense than the very kind of financialized transactional one, because there are lots of times when, in fact, all the time, we are the beneficiary, we are the recipient of many incredible gifts, and we haven't paid for any of them. So we owe a lot, and that's why I think coming into a relationship of giving back is not like, oh, I need to give back because I've extracted billions from people and now I'm going to give a bit back. It's like we already have the most incredible bounty. We've been given so much. If you think on a long enough time scale, the very fact that you and I we're all sitting here having a conversation on a technology platform about these topics on a hurtling rock through space that just happens to be the right distance from a sun that just happens to, an environment, that sustains life. All these many, many things that had to happen. I mean, we can only be in a relationship of gratitude because we've been the recipient of so many gifts. And that just kind of makes me really feel like, okay, how can I give? And how can I give, again, thinking about the harvest, like, I can't give what I don't have, right? To your point, Ben, if I'm giving, but I don't have anything to give, I deplete myself, right? That's no good, really. So I have to take only what's given, use it wisely, have lots of gratitude, and then give it freely forward as well. So I really think, I do think gratitude is possible in almost any situation. And I think rather than whether it's possible or not, I think it's useful in lots of situations. But just the same as coming into this, well, I think you put it beautifully, actually, like listening to ourselves and listening to each other. And Ben, you said the same thing, like where we put our attention, what we focus on. So that is a choice that we have. And for Viktor Frankl, right? He noticed people in the death camps who were totally consumed and totally kind of overwhelmed in the most understandable way by the conditions and the situation they found themselves in. And he also witnessed humans who had absolutely nothing, who had their whole humanity stripped away, who were choosing to give their food to other people. And so I think what he understood is that there is a wide range of different ways to respond to the situations that we find ourselves in. And it's not that one way is the right way and one way is the wrong way. But, we might come into kind of more, when we feel like we have the capacity, or maybe we don't have the capacity, but somebody can help us do it, to notice the gifts, to come into a relationship of gratitude with them, to kind of give the gift freely, ask for help, be given and receive. These things are possible, I think, more possible than we think a lot of the time, because we're so frequently told we don't have enough to give, can't give that away, it's too precious. Well, it's too precious not to give most of the time, in fact. Within well, we actually have a phrase, if it's within my gift to give something, it's like, do I have the capacity to give it? Well, if it is within the gift, then yeah, I'm going to try and give it.
I think it's a really powerful reminder, like what you said there about being, depleted. it's a really powerful, and I guess this kind of comes back to the gratitude piece, but I think framing it through exchange almost, because gratitude has become one of those like icky words where I think it's become like overused almost, but framing it through exchange is actually a kind of quite powerful lens really. And kind of seeing that sometimes if we are feeling depleted, it's probably just because, and to your point, Scott, about the abundance of exchange, you know, that the abundance of gifts we're constantly being given, we're just not looking at those gifts. That's probably why we are feeling depleted. And if we took the time to kind of think, hang on, what about all of these? And that is, in a way, it's just gratitude. But I think looking at it through the lens of like, there is always exchange from all these forms, and it's kind of like, I think it's not quite a nice, refreshing lens to look at it through. Of like, yeah, we are. There is an abundance of gifts coming our way, and it's almost like we've stopped receiving them. It's like, you know, there's all these. I've just had this picture in my head of all these like presents being left at our feet, and we're like looking over here like, where's my flipping gifts? Like, and there's all these gifts piling up around our feet, and we're like, where's my? You're looking at this person or this
fish
situation
trying to find water. You're like,
you're like, why are they
I'm
not
sure it's
giving me
around
my
here
gifts?
somewhere.
Exactly. It's
But
it's
so easy to see through it almost because it's so within everything. That's exactly why we see through it. It's totally just part of everything that you do.
And the thing is, when you notice how lucky you are or how fortunate you are, you know, like, and actually this, so I'll speak from personal experience here. This is something that my older sister Hilary and I often reflect on. So my older sister Hilary is a really keen runner. She's very physically active and everything. And I've done quite a lot of running too. So that's something we share in common. We often talk about it, and we both have trained for and run marathons. And, you know, first of all, training for a marathon is like the most middle-class white thing you can do in the whole world. So we'll just get the privilege out there for a second. You know, some people actually have to walk marathons to get sustenance and find shelter. And, you know, we live in a world currently where people are experiencing the most horrific, you know, circumstances. So to have the great privilege to be able to safely run 26.2 miles for fun, or to raise money is just recognizing that for a second. But when Hilary and I were out there like training, and you have a bad training run, or you get injured, or you're just experiencing some level of like hardship, you've chosen the hardship. So no tiny violins out for Scott or Hilary at this point, but we can quite easily and readily connect. And we often do. I remember Hilary said it to me, and I remember feeling it as well. Like, I can run. Like, and my mum got multiple sclerosis, and so she had it for 20 years. And over that period, I watched her not be able to run, not be able to walk, and so when we were out there running, and you're having a really just like coming in sideways, and you're slow and rubbish, and you feel crappy, and you think, God, I'll never be able to do this marathon. I'm able to very quickly think, I'm so lucky to run. I'm so lucky to be able to move my body in this way. Whether or not I'm enjoying it, you know, I'm already the recipient of this incredible gift, you know, and so it's not, I want to use a personal example, just to kind of say, like, that is a way that I access gratitude in relation to a gift I was given a long time ago that I really didn't want. You know, I would never have chosen that gift. I would never have chosen for my mum to not be able to walk and to have to see that. And then to, you know, all the many other quote unquote gifts I was given in that process. But actually, yeah, you know, that gift of gratitude is a perspective that I can actively access. And I often do access it. And it's, you know, it's more, I think, than just, you know, taking some kind of, you know, nourishment from other people's misfortune. It's not a kind of schadenfreude kind of thing. It is genuinely coming into a relationship of like, holy cow, like I can just like think about moving my legs in this way, and I can shift my body, and I can run. Like, it's an absolute miracle. You know, all the kind of biological and chemical things happening on a cellular level, and all the mechanical things happening on like all the systems of your body and respiration. I mean, it's mind boggling. The craziest gift upon gift upon gift, just to do this thing that we just take so much for granted. So I think coming into that relationship of gratitude, no, we don't walk around all day thinking, oh, I breathed again. Great, fantastic. I feel so happy. But from time to time, I think being able to access gratitude resources us. It supports us, and it's not just the individual gratitude. It's also kind of saying like how lucky I am to be in relationship with other humans, to be in community with other humans, and the many gifts that I'm receiving as a result of those relationships, those communities. So like we can resource ourselves incredibly well, even when we're depleted, even when we're feeling crappy. We can find resource in gratitude.
Yeah, it almost like feeds our ability to continue exchanging, right?
And to your point, Tom, as well, like sometimes we're not there, right? Or we're experiencing real hardship. And it's like, okay, well, gratitude can be a place where we can come into connection with resources we've maybe forgotten that we had, each other, some of the bounty that we have. And through that, we can slowly feel slightly better resourced. And then when the time is right, we might feel resourced enough to kind of turn to look at the suffering and the pain of ourselves. And maybe even if we feel especially well resourced, we might turn to face the pain and the suffering of this world that we live in, and the people that surround us. And to use some of these incredible gifts and privileges that we've been given to then come into a kind of a relationship where we can give those gifts freely to other people, and they can then benefit from those gifts as well, in kind. And so, yeah, it's like, I think as small and insignificant as gratitude can often feel, and I totally agree with what you're saying, Tom, like it's everywhere right now, like it's gratitude journal, everything's gratitude. And it could feel like that word has kind of been evacuated of all meaning. But actually for me, it feels like a very real term, because I do have my life, and actually people that I love don't have their life. And that's a very kind of small circle, like it's the small circle of my family, but it's one that I can connect to quite readily. But, when we feel like we have the capacity and the resourcefulness to open our hearts more broadly to some of the pain and suffering in a wider circle, maybe in our local community, we might see people who are struggling, and we might be able to open our heart to those people. And we might be able to offer some gifts, whether that's financial or time or energy or whatever it is. We might even be able to offer gifts in that small community. And as those circles widen and we feel a sense of connection to our fellow humans and even the more than human world, right? We look out into the world and we see the seas being polluted, and we suffer when we see that stuff. It hurts us. So that kind of upwelling of compassion, that desire to help is a beautiful thing. And if we have cultivated these resources, whether it's skills or gratitude or a sense of connection to each other, I think we're in a great position to potentially do something about that. And so, yeah, that's why ultimately I do feel somewhat optimistic in spite of some of the challenges we're staring at, because I think that in our acting together, from this place of gratitude and being well resourced, we can actually really support each other and the ecosystems that nourish us, and that we've been we've been given all these incredible gifts, and so far, on balance, we haven't been that great at giving the gifts forward, or maybe really like using the gifts well, you might say. And that part of the kind of the honorable harvest is like use it well. Well, that's up for debate whether we've used the gifts we've been given as well as we might. But I do think, again, that comes down to like, okay, well, maybe there's to your point, Ben, a different way that we can focus our attention, where we decide to pour our love and attention into, we can kind of come into different relationships of gratitude, and we can give those gifts more freely to each other. And I think that's kind of, in a way, like to not sound too cheesy, it's kind of where we start to heal some of the challenges that we have. And no, it's not so easy as having a nice conversation on a podcast on a Tuesday afternoon. But I do think it's a place to begin. It's a place to feel a sense of hope and a sense of connection to each other here on this moment, connection to people that might listen, and to know that, okay, there are these relationships that sustain us, that nourish us, and we can be very grateful that there are. And I think, when we, that's why I think this topic's such a genius topic. Like exchange, when we aren't feeling particularly resourceful, and sometimes, Ben, you've probably encountered me this way. I rock up to the window, knackered, push my cup over towards you, don't really greet you with the smile that you might have become accustomed to. Swipe my phone over the machine, pay the money, and just stroll off again. The gift of your presence at that moment, and the way that you serve and you give in that moment, often brings me slightly outside of the funk that I might be experiencing there. So just to kind of speak to the realness of it, the gifts that you give every day, I'm receiving them. And so I want to be in an attitude of gratitude in this call as well. And, the gift, at the start of this call, Tom is doing a whole bunch of technical wizardry in the background and has set up this, and I'm really in an attitude of gratitude around that as well, and for being invited into this conversation as well. So, I'm connected to it.
A fantastic exchange. It's such a long exchange that it's killed my camera. So that's I was suddenly like, hang on a minute. I was eyeing up for a second. I was like, why are you flashing at me? I have to. I am still here.
I was wondering if you were just being like really still and really present, Ben.
I thought.
Or if your camera was like. I thought, okay, Ben's testing out this kind of breathing hypothesis. I was like, can I just like not inhale?
Give me a minute.
See how long this lack of exchange and breath can last. But,
so good.
So that's probably a good place to end it, because I feel like we could just talk about this forever otherwise. So, Scott, and I want to kind of reciprocate as well. Like, thank you for your time and your presence and your contribution to this conversation. I think it has been an awesome exchange, and hopefully for the people listening as well, they're able to take something from it. I just want to finish on kind of saying, just echoing something you said earlier, Scott, in terms of, if anyone is going through a hard time at the moment, sometimes, to your point, Scott, like there isn't always like something you need to do. There isn't always a right answer. There isn't always an answer, let alone a right or wrong answer. There isn't always an answer, so it's not. And this is the thing with like podcasts and just consumption in general. It's kind of like, here's this advice and here's this advice. It's like, no, sometimes there is no answer. You just kind of have to.
And I think that was the hope of this podcast as well, really, is the food for thought kind of concept. It's not to allow that discussion to come into place. And I think you did great, Scott.
So Scott, where if people want to follow you, have you got like social channels they can find you or anything?
Not particularly at the moment. My website is currently down under repair, but you can find me
at the moment
at the Scott Drummond on Instagram. You won't find much there of interest, but if you wanted to connect, you could go there. You can also find me under Scott Drummond, my name, on LinkedIn, where I'm wearing a kind of blazer and looking very professional. So but seek me out if you found this conversation interesting, or any of the things that we've talked about have resonated. Like, reach out. It might be a gift to connect.
Amazing, beautiful. Awesome. Well, thank you so much, guys. This has been an amazing conversation. And we will see you guys back for episode 3.
Amazing. Thanks, guys.
Cheers.